Hello, you're listening to the COVID question with me, Martin Kelly, and this time not with the Lady Unreal. Hello and welcome to the COVID question. I'm Martin Kelly and this time I'm flying solo. Unfortunately, the Lady Unreal has been struck down with something and she's a little bit under the weather. It's not COVID related, she's just a little bit unwell. So we send her our best wishes. So I'm flying solo this time. So hopefully that won't be too boring for people because I know a lot of you listened for the comments made by Lady Unreal. And with that in mind, she actually was here when we spoke with Steve Maddern, who is the head person for Swindon Borough Council's public health strategy when it comes to tackling COVID-19. We asked him about fertility and the likelihood that the COVID-19 vaccine causes fertility problems. This is what he had to say.
Steve, thank you for joining us again. You're always very welcome here. You're always very helpful. So, some of the things that have come our way with regards to particularly young men and women who may be planning families in the future is the news that they've picked up on the internet that the vaccine can make you infertile. What's your take on that?
So I think firstly what we need to remember is the vaccination programme for COVID is incredibly important for getting us back to a normal way of life, or as normal as it can be, even though we're going to have to live with COVID as we go forward. And we know to date that the vaccine programme itself has prevented around 8 million infections and a further 30,000 deaths have been prevented as a result. We are aware that there's always a lot of misinformation out there, so things that aren't correct around the vaccine program. So it's really important that if you are looking at information about vaccinations, that you go to a reliable source. So whether you go online and look at the nhs.gov website, or whether you speak to a healthcare professional to kind of answer your questions or queries to determine whether vaccination is appropriate for you. Now, in regard to fertility, we know that information has been circulating suggesting that the COVID vaccine has an impact on fertility, but there is no evidence out there, there's no data to suggest that that is the case. So if you are in a relationship and you are considering wanting to get pregnant but are feeling anxious about having the COVID vaccine, then please talk to a healthcare professional about whether the vaccine is right for you or not.
Okay, milady, you are a young lady, could be planning a family at some point in the future. How does that make you feel hearing what Steve said about the vaccination and the lack of evidence backing up anybody that says that it can affect fertility?
I agree there's lack of evidence, but there's lack of evidence of what the vaccination does anyway.
Okay, so you're turning it on its head there by saying, well, yeah, but just because there's a lack of evidence, it doesn't mean to say that the evidence doesn't say that it doesn't make you infertile. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, I'm saying it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. There is a possibility that it does do that because there's not been enough testing done to understand what it does do to us yet.
Fair point, Steve.
I think that's a fair point. I think what we need to remember is that any medicine that is used in the UK, and a vaccine is a medicine at the end of the day, is rigorously tested for effectiveness, but also for safety before it's used within the general population. Now, we know that the COVID vaccines have been produced in super fast time, but there have been no steps missed out in regard to the safety processes that are undertaken with the vaccine as it would with other medicines. But with it being a new vaccine, and again, we would do the same for any new medicine that our doctors may prescribe us, is that you're quite right. the longer term safety data may not have yet been determined, and that's why, although the benefits or the value of vaccination against COVID is being seen, we continue to collect data regarding any potential health impacts as a result. So at this moment in time, based on the data and evidence that we have, there is no evidence to suggest that fertility is impacted by the COVID vaccine. But as we continue to gather data, obviously we will learn more about the vaccines in the longer term. And obviously opinion in science may change based on the further information that we gather.
Milady, does that make you feel any better about the vaccine and fertility, or does it still raise concerns with you?
It still raises concerns because, like you said, we don't understand what the long-term effects are going to be. So not knowing that and then putting something in your body and then not knowing what it could do to you in 10 years' time because it's not been tested for that long of a period of time doesn't really put me at ease.
So to flip that around, I think what we could also talk about is obviously the focus of this is whether the vaccine has an impact on fertility. But what we need to remember is the vaccine is effectively putting a very small amount of COVID into your body to create that immune response so that if you come across COVID again, you won't get infected. The other argument, looking at it from the other side, would be, well, we haven't seen any impacts on fertility as a result of COVID itself. So actually, my view would be is that the risk of having the vaccine to prevent COVID is probably more to be considered than potentially the impact on infertility. But again, the current evidence says that there is no issue with fertility. But if you're unsure or undecided about whether vaccination is right for you, take the time, look at the information that's online from credible sources. So you want to look at anything that has the NHS logo on it. And if you've still got questions or queries or still feel concerned, then please have a chat with your practice nurse or your GP.
Anything to add, Milady?
But that was for the first strain of COVID. There's been multiple strains of COVID since. So they're not vaccinating for these other strains of COVID.
Yeah, so again, really valid point. So we are looking at the vaccination process, the vaccinations that we have against COVID and whether they apply to the other strains or what we call variants. So at this moment in time, the one that's of main concern in the UK is the Delta variant. And we know that a single dose of vaccine doesn't have much effectiveness against the Delta variant, but a double dose does. So every time we're coming across these new strains, we're then looking at how those strains respond to vaccines. And as we move through the pandemic, just like flu, we will end up having additional vaccines come online that can respond to those new strains. So if you look at your flu vaccine, for example, there's several different flu strains within that particular vaccine, and that's aimed to cover a much broader base. And as we move forward, that's what we'll try and do with the COVID vaccine.
Okay, so I think at that point we need to ask the COVID question, Steve, which is to jab or not to jab? That is the question.
Absolutely. I think to jab is really important. The evidence is out there to suggest that it is effective against preventing severe illness and death, which is really important. What we also need to remember is that the majority of our cases at the moment are in the under 40s because people tend to mix more when they're younger. So again, from my point of view, I think it's really important to vaccinate, but we want people to make informed choices. So have a look at the information that's out there, and if you think it's right for you, then book and get your jab.
Steve Maddern, thank you very much.
Well, that was myself and Lady Unreal speaking to Steve Maddern a few weeks ago with regard to the possibilities of the COVID vaccine causing fertility problems. It seems that really isn't going to be the case. In the absence of Lady Unreal, I've done a little bit of paperwork and background work on this myself, and I've actually got some friends that have had both vaccines. One's had the Pfizer one, and one has had the AstraZeneca one, and they have conceived a child. So they're expecting at the moment. So congratulations to them. So although that's not conclusive proof that the vaccines do not cause fertility problems, shows that people can still get pregnant even after they've had both vaccines. So that's good news, surely. So in the absence of being able to ask the Lady Unreal whether to jab or not to jab following that conversation, I'll have to ask myself. So Martin, to jab or not to jab? And I think for me it would have to be to jab. I've been Martin Kelly. This has been the COVID question, flying solo. Unfortunately, with the absence of Lady Unreal. Hopefully she'll be back next time. Wishing her the best so that she gets back to us soon. It's a bit lonely in here by myself, so I'm going to go. Till next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, look after yourself. Bye-bye.